Parenting for the Everyday, a podcast dedicated to meeting parents in the trenches of parenthood. We explore how our faith fits into our parenting. With the help of our guests, we are seeking practical tips on how the gospel can speak into our day-to-day parenting. From the easy stuff to the hard stuff, we want to talk about it all.
Welcome to Parenting for the Everyday. I'm Holly Dyke-Andrew.
And I'm Becca Alvarez.
And today we are joined in the studio by our executive producer, Sarah Coons.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
This topic is actually one that was requested from us. It's been requested a couple times, and it is the topic of how to have consistent or creative time with God in a chaotic season of motherhood. And so that seems simple from the outside. Just make time. Just sit down. 15 minutes. What's the problem?
Does it seem simple from the outside? What outside are you guys looking at?
But
My perfected life.
But I think we all know in the day-to-day, when you're in the trenches of parenting and life, that it sometimes is harder than it seems. So that's our topic for today. I'm trying to think where the best place to start is. Maybe just why does it matter? Why are we trying to reach this goal? Sometimes it feels like that's just an answer to everything. Are you having your quiet time?
Yeah.
Like, when's your quiet time? And so I guess let's start with the point of why is it important to have a connection point with God every day? And then we can dive into what that needs to look like.
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think our audience, for the most part, I don't think most people would disagree that that needs to be a priority. I think what has happened for a lot of us is that, like, God is central to our life, right? He is the most important thing. But we've inflated this idea of a quiet time to such an epic, I don't know. It's hard for me because there is the balance, like, this is the most important thing. But I think we create this thing in ourselves where we're like, we've made it even so hard to do it because we're like, well, it's so important. And if I don't make time, then my whole rest of my day is ruined. And on some level, I guess it might be a little true. I don't know. I think we've just created it to be more than it is. And maybe people even define what is a quiet time. What does that look like? Because I think for some people, it is like, well, I have to sit for 45 minutes in reading these many chapters and then in prayer. And I think that's what really feels intimidating. It feels like, I can't do that. And then you feel just like, well, then I'm not even going to do it.
Why would I even try? Yeah. What's the point?
Whereas I think if we kind of break it down and just say, hey, it's creating space in your very chaotic life to say, I can't do this on my own. I need you, Lord. I need your guidance. I need your help. I need to be dependent on you. I need to humble myself, like all these things. And I think what we're going to talk about is maybe giving little ways or practices that we can do that seem very doable instead of like this outrageous, maybe like even we think Bible study, highlighting, taking notes. Yeah, I think there's just a lot of maybe misconceptions of what that can look like. But I think at the outset we say it's important because we know we can't do this on our own. We can't do parenting on our own. We can't do life on our own. And I think when we are trying to do it on our own, we become exhausted. We become burnt out. And I think we don't understand, too, what is the purpose of us being on this earth? It is to honor and glorify the Lord and serve him. So what does that look like? How do we do that? Well, we can't do that without a relationship, without knowing him, right?
Yeah. I almost like the analogy where it's like if the world or life is almost like a carnival mirror. And so if we're like looking at our kids and ourselves and our families through that, like it's distorted, right? And so we need our connection point with the Lord to give clear glasses to what you said.
Really
I liked
good.
you said, like, so you can see yourself, like, so you can see your family, your purpose, your dependency, all of those things. We need those clear glasses. Otherwise we start to see the world through this carnival mirror, but we think it's reality. And then we're making decisions based on something that's not even a reality. So
Yeah.
I almost think that
was a great analogy.
I know. I like that a lot.
I feel like
once in a while I say something great, guys.
I feel like for me too, much like that carnival mirror, not only does it distort things, but then it has me grasping for a way to make myself feel better. Because if I'm seeing a distorted view of me or of my kids or of my life, then I start to get hypercritical of other people because I'm trying to overcompensate to be like, okay, well, in this carnival mirror, I look crazy. And so I'm going to try to criticize someone else to make myself feel better. So that is one of my first kind of symptomologies to start to pay attention to is if I start to over-criticize people for really no reason, it means there's something going on inside of me that I need to recalibrate.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, this isn't necessarily a part of the benefit question, but I think a complication to what you were saying, Sarah, with the way that devotions have become inflated is I also start to see it as a checklist. So I am an achiever personality. And so I start my routine and we check, and I feel great. And then we move on. But that's it. It's a very surface level. Like I
did it.
Yep. I've got a check mark on my phone that day is passed, and then we can move on. But the vice versa too, if I start to miss days, then I feel like I'm failing. And so I avoid because I can't even look at that app because now I'm behind. It just reminds me that I'm failing in that area. So then I avoid. But other than that, we're doing great.
But I think there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah,
I'm like, I think we need to talk about both. I'm kind of, okay, so like even this idea of what does it need to look like? Because you even said like this inflated view of like you've got your coffee and the birds are singing and you're in your comfortable chair and and
you're making it pretty.
And all your kids are either
and no
sleeping.
interruptions.
Yes.
And you weren't too tired to get out of bed. You popped right out. You've done your
mind
exercise.
your mind never
You've worked
wanders.
out. You already worked
Yep.
out. Your mind never wanders. And it's like, to your point, it's really not like that. And so then you're like, I cannot get it right. And that's almost a lie of the enemy where he's saying like, you're a failure.
Then
God
what's the
doesn't
point?
want you like this. You got to get it together. He doesn't want you. Where I think the Lord is just like, come as you are. What do those middle moments look like? Is it a mess? Is it, where is it? It doesn't have to be this picture perfect. And so, I don't know, let's unpack what can it look like? How can it look different?
Yeah. I think too, even to something that Becca was saying, like there is something to be said about they are called spiritual disciplines for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So there is times where we're going to do something maybe out of rote, patterns or rhythms because we know this is just part of what we need to do. And I think sometimes when we're able to make that a regular rhythm, it begins to more like transform our mind and our heart as we're doing that. But all that to say, I totally understand what you're saying because I am going through a devotional right now with like the date, it's like
The date-
September 23rd. I'm like, it's September 24th. I didn't do September 23rd. So it's like, all the things. And then I do the stupidest thing where it's like, well, I guess the Holy Spirit won't speak to me through this because I'm reading
because you're a day late.
I'm on the wrong day. Like, how legalistic is that? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the original question?
It's just what can it look like?
Yeah.
Because I think I do think at some point we should talk about like habits are important.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
what can it look like? I think of the mom who is just
Yeah.
barely getting by. She's got littles everywhere. It's you.
It's me. I'm that
It's
mom.
you.
It's
I
me.
know.
I was gonna say,
the
Becca,
picture that you have in your head is me.
It's you. You're never alone.
No.
Night or day, there's
No.
always a need. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
to have this long 45 minutes, it just doesn't feel realistic.
No.
And so what can it look like? What does it look like to connect with God, to honor God, to reframe your mind in that season?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, at least for me and you guys, and I think you guys can each contribute to this conversation, but I remember when I was in like Becca's stage of motherhood and I just had to let go of all of my preconceived ideas and notions of what it meant to spend time with the Lord. And when I was able to do that, I felt like the Lord met me in those moments. I wasn't able to have those really focused, concentrated times. And part of that was just the physical exhaustion, the mental exhaustion, all those things. And so I just remember going, okay, Lord, I don't need to think about what this person is doing or what this person is doing, but I need to know like what is good for me and my relationship with you. And so that's when I don't know, I think the guilt and the burden of all that, when that went away, I think that's when I really started to see my personal relationship with the Lord flourish.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't doing it for someone else or to meet someone else's expectations. I was truly doing it because I wanted to honor the Lord and serve him and do those things. And so I think it can look really different for each person. But I think what's important is there's lots of things we can do, whether it's, putting worship music on and listening to that, maybe listening to a podcast that really challenges you. But I think it is important to say there really is no substitution for the Word of God as well. So you can do all of those things, but I do think you need to spend time in the Word. But I also think if it's 5 minutes, it's 5
Start
minutes.
there. Yeah.
Start there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then don't beat yourself up if you're the next day like, I didn't do it.
Right.
You know, just give yourself grace in that, because I do think when you said, hey, the enemy will really attack you and lie to you about that. It's being like, okay, well, you missed it. You're not good enough.
Because he doesn't
Just
want
stop.
you
Yeah, and you
connected
just
to
kind
your
of throw your
source.
hands
Yeah,
up
he
and
doesn't
go.
want that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that ended up being really important for me too is like I out loud will speak to the Lord like throughout the day. And I remember being at home with my kids and just being like, this is really hard. Or like, you know, and I would say like, Lord, please give me patience in this. But I think it's just this saying like, I can't, like that declaration, like I cannot do this on my own. I need you. And so I think if you can do those things where, again, it was 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, but it was a constant reminder of who I was and who God is. And just my dependence on him. So I think even simple like things like that can be game changers for people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We are all wired differently.
Yeah.
But yet we have this idea that quiet time has to look the same.
That's true.
And so I read
Yeah.
something this week that was really challenging. And I actually feel like there's different things that I incorporated like as I was figuring it out. But this idea of some people are like, I read this verse and then I do this, but because they're structured.
They need
and that's
that.
how their mind.
Yes.
Like my mind is more creative. I'm a more chaotic person. And so at one point I had like a Bible that I could journal in and almost like kind of doodle in and kind of, you know, as I read something, and that really worked. And so right now I'm in a season where I'm walking and listening to the word versus like sitting, because it's helping me to be able to just have a more healthy outlet, and I can pray while I'm moving. And so I think we need to get rid of this notion of like, it needs to look one way. Nothing else we do looks the same, because we are all created so differently. And so like our quiet times can look different based on like how the Lord wired us. Are we creative? Let's use it. Like I even think of, this might be crazy, but I even think of like, man, can someone paint and pray and have a time where they are like listening to scripture and painting and doing that as a way to worship and honor the Lord, because that's a gift that they've given them, and things of that nature. I also read something, I wrote down this quote that I just want to read that says like, God is everywhere. He's in the mornings and the evenings. He's in the doctor's office. He's in your kids. He isn't asking you to carve out 3 hours to be with him in the morning. You don't have to be tucked away in secret with a Bible on your lap to communicate with him. He's right there. The guilt you feel over not being able to do all the things or get all the way through the book of Exodus is not from God. He isn't asking you to measure up. He is never going to withhold himself from you. God wants to go with you into every part of your life, not just the time that you carve out space for him. And so the article like went on to say like, okay, you're in a doctor's office. Are you able to pray? Are you able to talk to your kids about the way God made the body? And all these things are times that you're spending, connecting with him and kind of recalibrating your vision.
I think that to your point too, Holly, I think listening to the Bible can be really helpful. I tend to be pretty mentally exhausted by the end of the day. And so my craving is not to read. Anyone that does read, I'm very impressed by you and I want to be you, but I'm just not you. And so my craving is to zone out. But something else that I do every night is to shut down our kitchen and clean up the playroom. And I wonder if just putting on headphones during that time period, when I'm by myself anyway, boys are in bed, and just trying to listen. And what a beautiful way to zone out. Not zone out, zone in, but end the day, I mean, as opposed to scrolling on social media or having some TV show on in the background. So that's something that I personally am going to try to incorporate more, because I think that closing my day out that way will be so much better than how I currently am.
Well, and then you could go ahead and be like, okay, Lord, this was really hard.
Yeah.
Like, help me through this tomorrow, or like, thank you for this moment. And you can have some time of gratitude. I love that. I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's good.
I think the other thing too, and I don't know, maybe we'll get into this more with other questions, but I do think, this idea of sitting and being quiet is really good, because I think there is something to be said about the solitude and the silence of that, and listening, the spiritual discipline of listening. But I think for many of us, we just live in a really we all are living in a really fast-paced culture. Things are moving, constant distractions. And so it's really hard for our minds not to wander. So I know that happens, especially even if I'm sitting in my home, because if I look around, I'm like, oh, I need to do that, or I need to do that. It's just, I can't. And so one of the things I've been doing, and I've been doing for a while now, and it's been really, really great is I work out and then I go and walk in my neighborhood, and that's my time to pray. And I mean, I do think people in my neighborhood probably think I'm a little like,
you're talking out loud.
Yeah, because I am seriously talking out loud. And something else that I do.
Like,
and
here
again,
comes the crazy lady.
I know, but it's one of the things that I do because it just sets my heart is I will tend to sing. And okay, this I probably won't do out loud, but I'll either sing like the doxology or something like that. Just goes like, okay, Lord, this today is yours and I'm giving it to you. And then I'm able to like focus on, praying for other people, praying through things. But it like when I'm walking, I feel like I can focus better because I'm not so distracted. And honestly, being outside, being in God's nature is really helpful to me. Yeah.
I want to go back to the tension point between checking a box and building a habit, because I do think it's worth just unpacking a little bit. Because I think both are really important, right? You don't want it to be just a checkbox, but at the same time, when you build a habit and life falls apart, you fall back to your habits. And so on the other hand, it's the same thing with working out, right? If you have never worked out at all, you have to start somewhere, and it hurts and it's uncomfortable until it becomes part of your regular rhythm. And so maybe let's just unpack that tension a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that working out is such a good example because for me, I work out every day and I work at the same time just about every day. And when I miss that, I immediately crave it later on in that day. And I think for that it is checking a box in some ways, but it's checking a box and also building the habit in the sense of like my body is used to that. My mind is used to that. The endorphins that I get set my day up. Everything. My day is so much better when I work out in the morning. And I think that would be the exact same thing if I would spend time with God every morning, as opposed to just feeling like I need to check a box and not really pay attention, but just like finish it, scroll through, and then be done. If you build it to the sense of like you start to see the benefits as the habit builds, that you miss those benefits after a while.
And I think it totally changes with seasons, because I think what you were describing as far as like, these are the moments I have when I'm cleaning up at night. This is the season I'm at. I'm in a little bit of a different season. And so my kids are a little bit more self-sufficient. And so I have been convicted recently that I need to start my day this way. Now, in the past, I haven't felt that way, where I feel like the Lord is like, I'll meet you where you're at. I'll meet you where you're at. And I feel like now the Lord's really been pulling me and saying like, if you start with me and we frame our day, I'm just in a really intense season of life that it is better. It is better by the time I end the day. But I think that ebbs and flows. So I think for me, I'm having to build a habit of where the Lord is asking me to get up earlier. And I am having to put aside my comfort of my warm bed and the fact that I am tired. But that's the season that I am in. And so that is where I am called. So this is a new habit for me. It might not be the same habit for you or for you, So I think just knowing your season and being willing to say, okay, Lord, what are you asking me to do? What do I have to change? Are you meeting me? Am I meeting you? That kind of mentality.
Now I'm going to say something that might be a little spicy.
Great. We love spicy.
All right. Spicy. I do think you prioritize what's important to you. So if you can wake up really early to go work out, and then you're saying, I don't have the time to spend with the Lord, I'd be like something feels off to me there, right? Because your health is really important, but then you're putting that above the Lord, right? And so I think that's where we tend to things get really messy in our lives too, right? Because we're going, okay, I really need this, and this is really important. God's here. He'll never leave me. He'll never forsake me. But like, man, like when you talk about like when I find myself being critical of other people, or I find myself, me personally, Sarah, being short with my kids or my husband, like something's off there. And that's because I haven't prioritized the Lord and created that spiritual discipline. So I would say, hey, if that means you set your alarm 10 or 15 minutes earlier, then that's important. Like you need to do that. Now, I think it doesn't, I don't know if it really matters when you like spend time with the Lord. I think like you said, like I have found that this is really important for me right in this season. Yeah. So I don't know if it's, I'm not saying that.
For sure.
But I am saying, like, if you're coming to the end of the day and you haven't spent time with the Lord, I would look back and go, okay, well, where can I make time to do that? And that again, like, what is it? It says it takes like 2 weeks, right, to build a habit. And so I do think if that's something you can say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, it is doable. But I think the thing to remember is, hey, we are dealing with spiritual stuff. So it's not like we have an enemy, someone who doesn't want you to spend time with the Lord, right? Who's causing a lot of maybe self-doubt or questions or just being like, whatever, it's not a big deal. So I think it's a little different than other habits that we're talking about, like working out. That doesn't feel like you have someone mentally telling or in your mind or heart, like questioning those things. But I think it's just a challenge for each of us. Like, hey, really prioritize your day in a way that you're putting the Lord first. So if you haven't made time for him, if you come to the end of the day and you haven't spent time, I would say, like, hey, look back at that and see where it is that maybe you can make a change, to do that.
I was just gonna say, I think you can ask him. Like, I think you could kind of be like, hey, Lord, I know that I need more of you. Show me where you want it, kind of thing. And I think the Holy Spirit will be faithful to lead you. And is it like, okay, I'm going to get up earlier, or I'm going to, do this at night, or I'm going to, carve this out. Like, I think if you ask him and say, like, I want to, here's what I'm giving before you, I think the Lord will be faithful to say, let's start with this. Let's do this. I want you. So,
yeah.
And I think too, with that, I think that we often have more time than we think that we do throughout the day. For me, it can be less about time and more about wanting to. And that is a little shameful to say on a public podcast, but it's very, very real. And I think that sometimes, much like working out, you have to build a habit that you don't necessarily feel like doing to get to a place that you need to do it and you want to keep doing it. And that's where I am, is wanting to start to build that habit even when I don't feel like it, even when I feel too tired or like my mind wants to be doing something else, building it there with the hope and the knowledge that at some point I'll want to and it will come easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, I echo you 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I think we've all gone through seasons where I just don't want to.
Right.
I just want to normalize that. Like, I think that's happens for all of us.
All right. As we kind of like wrap up this episode, what I guess would be something that we want, parents to hear, like, as they're in the season of parenthood, what do we want them to take away from this episode?
I think for me, I would want parents to know that this is important and it's something that makes us better parents. It makes us better people for others to be around. It's something that is hard for a reason, and it's because it's important. And so kind of stepping into the hard and the discomfort at times and trying to make it a habit and a priority, even starting small and with the intent to build to something bigger.
Yeah. I just think God doesn't want like a social media faith.
Yeah.
I think he just wants a real relationship with the real hard, messy, chaotic moments of our lives and whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And I would say, like, this is, just your relationship with the Lord is what's going to carry you through parenting. I am, kind of on the other side of it, and the times that we have really experienced really difficult things, it's my relationship with the Lord that has brought me the peace, the comfort, and the knowledge that he hasn't left. He hasn't forsaken me. And the fact is, he is in control. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not in control. And I think for parents, that's what we really struggle with. We want to be in control of our kids' lives. And the fact is, we aren't. And when we talk a lot about that more is caught than taught, you want your kids to be seeing you spending that time with the Lord because that's something you want for them, right? And so I think that don't let it overwhelm you, but just know that the Lord desires to have a relationship with you, and the joy, the encouragement, all the things that come out of that will be so worth the time, the effort that you and the priority that you make it.
Well, this has been Parenting for the Everyday. I hope that everyone feels encouraged and convicted from this episode. Make sure you tune in next time as we talk about something else.